So dear respected colleagues, I lost the connection for a while. So as we are discussing that we need to create a plan well ahead of the data collection. And we saw the diagram of planning before we need to do data collection for the project plan needs assessment. Think of the data collection process as a mini project. In all reality, there is a specific outcome, understanding of the needs, a specific scope of work, budget, and timeline that all need to be managed. Failure to properly plan for the data collection could result in an ineffective process in that data could be collected that is not relevant to the project idea or the team could miss, including key information that is critical in determining the needs for the intervention. Now there is a blue box. Let me read it because I think this is not especially important to discuss it. Program data, lessons learned, and evaluation. If the project is part of a program, there may already be data and information available that the project team can use in the identification or validation of needs. This may reduce the amount of data that needs to be collected as long as the data is timely and relevant. Another great tool to use during the data collection in the identification and definition phase is the lessons learned and evaluations from previous projects, as long as they are timely as well. These evaluations and lessons learned should be incorporated into future projects, usually contain some data and information that can be used in the new project. Types of data, secondary data, information available through published and unpublished sources, including literature reviews, surveys, evaluations, assessments, reports from NGOs, UN agencies, international organizations, and government offices. Secondary data can be very cost-effective and should be the first sources as accessed for assessment data. Unfortunately, access to secondary documents is often limited and care is needed when interpreting secondary data. Sometimes you will need to use primary data collection to verify the reliability and relevance of secondary data to the specific context or to obtain deeper, more specific information. Keep in mind that secondary data can be quantitative or qualitative. So strengths and weakness of secondary data. Relatively cost-effective and can be done using the internet or records search. Requires fewer human resources to be dedicated to the process. Take less time to conduct in comparison with primary and secondary data collection. The weaknesses can be challenging to find data that is current. Not all sources are created equal. Using reliable and trustworthy resources may be challenging for individuals who are not well versed in traditional research methods. So it has some weaknesses we need to take notes. Primary quantitative data. In situations where secondary sources do not provide sufficient information or if the information is simply not available, organizations can collect data via quantitative assessment approaches, surveys, questionnaires, tests, standardized observation instruments that focus on information that can be counted and subjected to statistical analysis. Strengths, quantitative data is scalable in that way, in that you can get a high number of responses and generalize the results. If the questions and answers are written well, there tends to be less personal bias in the results. Standard approaches can be used and you can compare the results to other data. Quantitative data can miss the depth of the situation. Contextualization is also difficult when there are standard questions and answers for each respondent. are primary qualitative data. In contrast to quantitative data approaches, qualitative approaches seek to capture participants' experiences using words, pictures, and objects, and even nonverbal cues provided by respondents. Qualitative data is most often collected as an open-ended narrative, unlike the typical question and answer format of surveys, questionnaires, or tests. It has some strengths and weaknesses. Strengths provides a wide range of information based upon the experience of the respondent, provides more in-depth information and feedback than quantitative data, helps the project team better understand the context through the experiences of respondents, providing details. Weaknesses: cannot be scaled up and generalized, requires significant time and resources to implement, requires that the data collection team has the knowledge and capacity to implement qualitative data collection methods. The strengths and weaknesses of each method need to be weighed against the time and resources you have available at this point in the project. You should be careful to select the most appropriate and cost-effective tools and approaches to collect information. There are many opinions on which data collection method is the best, quantitative or qualitative, primary or secondary. Each method has a purpose and a strength. For example, primary data is often perceived as preferable to secondary data. However, in reality, a project team may not have the capacity or resources available to conduct a full-scale quantitative study. So there is a proposal of mixed methods data collection. This method consists of a combination of primary quantitative, primary qualitative, secondary data sources. A mixed method approach provides a robust foundation for examining data from a variety of perspectives. So it's a we can call it in one term the holistic approach of data collection, and it helps. The mixed method helps to triangulate data so that one data reinforces the another data, and that reinforced data can help us to take informed decision or data-driven decisions, and data-driven decisions always can be reflected as a more appropriate project plan or project concept note. So there's a box of some examples of data collection. Secondary data, it can be literature review, records review, existing statistics, indices, government documents, other NGOs documents. Primary quantitative data, knowledge, practice, and coverage service, household surveys, standardized tests and surveys, standardized observation instruments, anthropometric measurement. Brainstorming, affinity diagrams, focus groups, historical narratives, timelines, locality mapping, semi-structured interviews, key informant interviews, ranking exercises. While primary data collection can be specifically targeted to the precise needs of a proposed project, collecting primary data can also take a lot of time and money and involve many people. For this reason, many organizations recommend that first round of data collection rely on secondary data, and that subsequent rounds use primary data collection approaches to fill in the gaps which are not covered by secondary data. Furthermore, while perceptions often suggest that qualitative data has less rigor than quantitative data, quantitative approaches often run the risk of raising expectations among local communities and partners and can be quite costly. Qualitative data assessments, in turn, can be rigorous if planned and implemented with expertise, and can uncover revealing insights into the reasons behind the trends that are identified through secondary and quantitative approaches. A combination of secondary and primary methods, including both qualitative and quantitative tools in the same data collection process, can provide a more comprehensive, integrated picture for the project team to make decisions. And in the end, it is all about making decisions. Before starting data collection, you need to ask yourselves and your team, how will this data be used? If there is no acceptable answer to this question, do not proceed. Time and resources are too valuable at this stage to be wasted on collecting data for the sake of collecting data. Make assessment exercises have collected extensive data which have produced large documents that often sit on the shelf collecting dust. These documents are poor use of resources, can be an intrusion on the lives of stakeholders, create false expectations that could damage important partner or beneficiary relationships. Whenever you begin the data collection process, keep the following questions in mind as you determine what data you need to collect and which methods. What information do I need to obtain? From which sources can I get the information? Are there reliable secondary sources I can use? How will this information help in my decision-making process about the project? Does the data collection team have the technical and human resource capacity to implement this data collection effectively? Can the information I obtain be used for either other projects or programs? How, when, and by whom will the data be analyzed? How will we manage and file the information and data we obtain from the collection process? Triangulating data. An approach to limit the subjectivity of problem definition and to work through differing perspectives of real needs is through using data triangulation. Triangulation is a powerful technique that facilitates data validation through cross-verification from more than two sources. For example, if a study uses only one data collection method perspective, the temptation is to believe that the findings are strong. If an investigator uses two methods perspectives, the results may well clash. However, by using three methods perspectives to answer a question, the hope is that the results of at least two of the three will reinforce each other. On the other hand, if three conflicting answers are produced, the investigator knows that the question needs to be reframed, methods reconsidered, or both. At its core, triangulating data increases the confidence and validity of the study results. By combining multiple perspectives and methods, researchers can hope to overcome the weakness or biases and the problems that come from single method or a single observer perspective, thereby increasing the credibility and validity of results. One way to use triangulation in the process of needs identification is to use an approach introduced by American sociologist Jonathan Bradshaw, who believed that needs assessment should explore 4 types of need in a community, and and that the presence of all types of needs would indicate a real need. So before going to discuss the Bradshaw's 4 categories of social needs, let us summarize this long need assessment related discussion. So first of all, types of data. In terms of data sources, there are 2 kinds of data. Number 1 is secondary data, which is already the published things and unpublished things, but not directly collected. And this data has some good sides and bad sides, means weaknesses. And the primary quantitative data and primary qualitative data, which is directly collected from the field, and it reinforces the secondary data. And in some cases, you don't need a secondary data. If you have primary qualitative data or quantitative data, or both primary qualitative and quantitative data, but in development sector, it is proposed by the PMDPro guide that if you can have a mixed method of data collection, so that our need assessment will be more supportive and more rich. And the data triangulation is the thing where we support one data with another data, so that the data is reinforced and it can build a very sophisticated and comprehensive and holistic data-driven decision in terms of framing the report for needs assessment, and this need assessment will be treated with high regard as it has more data, and the data are reinforced by other data. So that's why in every situation, not only during writing a need assessment or formulating a need assessment, we can use this data triangulation method in our other practical life and professional life too. So to understand need assessment, we need to understand Bradshaw's 4 categories of social needs. And the 4 categories of social needs are felt needs, expressed needs, normative needs, and comparative needs. Felt needs focus on the thoughts and dreams of the community itself, that they think should be a priority. A felt need is likely to be subjective and could be better described as a want. Felt need is necessarily affected by the knowledge and expectations of the individual, which can or may be unrealistic or unaffordable. For example, mothers might express displeasure with the mess and sickly conditions that result from lack of hygienic situation, but might be unaware of alternatives that exist to change the current state. So this is the need that is dreamed or often thought by the beneficiaries or end-line users or the customers. but they don't have a solution to offer. Expressed needs. This kind of need is usually done through observation. What is community expressing through their actions? For example, if there are long waiting lists for a service, then there is an indication that the community prioritizes the need. At times, the expressed needs are consistent with what the community has mentioned through their felt need. However, at times, these needs might not be concretely identified publicly as a felt need as a result of political or cultural pressures, or because nobody has ever asked. For example, families might not have expressed their displeasure with the lack of hygienic sanitation verbally, but now beginning to identify locations where they dispose of their household refuse, garbage pits, and others. So express needs is expressed by the community in different situations, but they don't talk about this, and maybe they don't have the wording to talk about it. For example, there are 2 hospitals. People are making long line in one hospital, and the other hospital is empty. So that we understand that in this hospital there are something special. So, and if we talk to them, if we talk to the hospital professionals or staff members, then we'll understand that why the beneficiaries are there and what is their expectation. Maybe the hospital is clean, the behavior of the staff members is very friendly, maybe the price of the medicine is low, and maybe the service of the operation theater is very good. So that's how people show their needs through expression, and Bradshaw defined it as an expressed need. Normative needs. This kind of need compares the current situation to a set of professional or expert standards. Often, these needs are identified by a professional or expert, maybe a physicians, engineers, public health professionals, etc. For example, a sanitation expert might indicate that rates of fecal matter in household water are above the standard established by the Ministry of Health. So normative needs are defined by the professions, that by the subject expert, by the specialists. I think we can understand it. It means easily. Comparative needs. These needs compare the current situation with the situation of others. One of the most common uses of this approach has been the comparison of people's access to resources. This approach organizes that needs as a relative concept, so any debate about need must take place in the context of a comparison between people. For example, members of fishing cooperative may observe that the fish stocks are higher in a nearby town with sanitation facilities. Validating needs. If your project is under the umbrella of a program or through a request for proposal, it may be that the project concept has already been determined. At this point, doing a full-blown needs assessment will not be required. However, it will be beneficial for you to further define and validate the needs through a simple need validation process. You may want to gather data related to the targeted beneficiaries and the context in which you will be implementing to ensure that the project is viable and the needs that had been previously identified are still valid. So there is a diagram In number 1 picture, a group of community people is showing that they need a medical facility, express needs, then comparative needs. An expert is comparing normative needs, and an expert is talking about the Delta River established norms. So let me read. I'm sorry, maybe I am becoming a bit lazy. Felt need. A group of community members indicate they want a health clinic. Expressed need. Families have no access to treated water provision and collect water for cooking and drinking from Delta River. Comparative needs. Surveys showed that number of children with waterborne illnesses are much higher than in other communities. As organizations explore a community's needs, the challenge will be to ensure that the needs identification process is accurate and honest. Often individuals and groups already have an idea based upon their observations and experiences about what type of project or service is preferred by a particular development organization. Development organizations need to avoid sharing priorities to the community prior to identifying their needs, because they might provide answers that ensure they are selected for participation and benefit. For example, if a development organization is known to primarily support water projects, then project participants are more likely to express their problems and solutions in ways that they anticipate will fit the potential interventions preferred by that development organization. A water project. So now we understood the need categories listed by Mr. Bradshaw. Let us repeat again: the felt needs, expressed needs, normative needs, comparative needs. So we have to memorize these 4 kinds of needs. Let me repeat again: felt needs, expressed needs, normative needs, comparative needs. Felt needs, which is dreamed or thought by the beneficiaries, but they don't or can't offer a solution. Expressed needs, expressed by the beneficiaries, and it can be learned by observation by the researchers or the project team. Normative needs, the comment of experts, specialists, and professionals. Comparative needs, comparing one situation with another situation. Now we have collected the data. It's time to analyze the data. Need analysis. The purpose of data collection is to provide broadly explore and gather information on a wide variety of issues, while the purpose of need analysis is to organize and examine the data so that useful information can be extracted from it. When identifying and defining the needs for the project, you will want to organize your needs analysis into 2 categories: current and future state analysis. Current state analysis: where are we now? What is the situation on the ground right now? What are the conditions within the community? What are the problems they are facing and the priorities for interventions? Who are the stakeholders associated with the problem? What kind of capacity do we, as the project team and partners, have to successfully deploy this kind of intervention? So this is the current state analysis. Now future state analysis. What questions can be asked? Where do we envision we will be at the end of the project? What changes do we expect by the end of the project? What are some of the risks that could interfere with our ability to achieve that change? What kind of sustainability does the intervention have? Can the change be maintained once the project ends? Now, a brief discussion on current state analysis. The primary components of the current state analysis are to explore the stakeholders, their power and influence in the project, and to identify or detail the problem that will be addressed by the project. At this point, you will be brainstorming, trying to explore the various root causes and direct effects of the problem through the problem tree tool and using the Venn diagram and stakeholder matrix to assess and detail the stakeholders involved in the project. So in current state analysis, let us take note, we need to use 3 tools: problem tree tool, Venn diagram, and stakeholder matrix. And in current state analysis, we have to project on the current situation, what is on the ground. We have to write it down in a comprehensive way, and in many cases you will not find the term current state analysis as it is written there. Maybe it can be a problem statement, it can be a situation analysis, it can be a context analysis, but the main purpose of this analysis is to establish the rationale of the project by providing the data that is available and collected and analyzed, the method which is already presented by the DPro guide. Now, stakeholder analysis. Stakeholder analysis, let us read it first, then we can discuss shortly. Stakeholders can make or break our interventions. Stakeholders can make or break our interventions, which is why so much emphasis is put on stakeholder analysis and management in the project DPro. Throughout this guide, you will see reference to utilizing participatory approaches and involving stakeholders if possible and when necessary. To be able to do this, a comprehensive stakeholder analysis must be conducted and revisited throughout the entire life of the project. Experiences show that stakeholders are overlooked or misunderstood in the project, or their interests are poorly engaged or excluded during a project. It can often result in unexpected and undesirable outcomes. Projects that take the time to identify and understand stakeholders benefit from a clearer understanding of the individuals, groups, and institutions that will be affected by and should benefit from project activities. A better indication of the capacities of these stakeholders, a more informed understanding of who could influence and contribute to the planning and implementation of the project. To succeed, the project team needs to develop the discipline to manage these stakeholders' relationships. Team members need to understand the reality and the complexity of interests and relations. Evaluate and predict project impacts, both positive and negative, on all stakeholder groups, and design and implement engagement plans that encourage project participation and strong communication. So we talked about the stakeholder earlier. Let me read more. Components of a strong stakeholder management system include, we need stakeholder identification, in identification and definition phase, stakeholder analysis during identification and definition phase, means this phase we are reading now, we are studying now. Then in project setup phase, which is the phase number 2, stakeholder engagement and stakeholder communication. It means during project planning, revision and analysis, which is a continuous process. Step 1, stakeholder identification. During the identification and definition phase, you will want to by first identifying and analyzing the stakeholders related to the project. You will continue to develop and detail engagement and communications as you move through the other phases of your project, and to help ensure that you start thinking about the vast array of stakeholders related to your project. The project DPro has divided stakeholders into 6 categories. The categories are users, the people who will directly benefit from the products or services of the project. For example, in the Delta River latrine building project, users will include community members who will benefit from the latrines and an improvement in the quality of river water as a result. Governance, the people or groups of people who have an interest in how things are managed on the project. For example, this category might include the following subgroups: project boards, steering groups or sponsors who manage the governance framework of the project, auditors and regulators who establish the compliance requirements and regulatory context of the project, funders, individuals or organizations or INGOs who provide financing of the project. These funders may be external, as when a donor organization provides financing, or internal, as when the project is financed with internal funds. Providers, the individuals who actively participate in the work of the project. Managers, team members, implementing organizations, contractors and suppliers fall into this category. Influencers, the people who have the ability to change the direction positively or negatively of the project. An example might be local media, government officials, business interests, or community leaders. Dependents, those who want something from the project other than the planned final product or service. Typically, dependents are other projects or functional units of the organization that need one of the project deliverables. Sustainers, groups responsible for supporting the product or service after the project is completed. If we look at our latrine building project as an example, the local Delta River municipality may be expected to assume medium and long-term ownership of maintaining the latrines once the project has been completed. Some considerations to keep in mind when classifying stakeholders into categories include: stakeholders may overlap categories. There are many instances where an individual or a group would fall into more than one category. For example, communities could be both users during the project and sustainers as the project closes. Break categories into subcategories. The categories can be broken down into subcategories if helpful. For the governance stakeholder category, for example, is already broken into 3 subcategories. Stakeholder categories will evolve over time. New stakeholders can enter the intervention area while others lose their influence or interest. Stakeholder identification is therefore an ongoing process, should be revisited at intervals throughout the life of the project. Brainstorming a high-level list of stakeholders during this phase is very useful in developing an understanding of the context and for setting expectations of stakeholders early on. If you use a participatory approach to your project, this will also ensure that you are engaging the right stakeholders. at the right time in each phase of the project. For now, brainstorm the potential stakeholders by using the 6 categories outlined above. Step 2, stakeholder analysis. Some guiding questions that will help in your analysis are: will they advocate for your project and provide support? Will they potentially present a challenge in moving your project forward? These relationships will be further developed in later stages, but it is important that you begin to think about them in the identification and definition phase. So we'll talk about stakeholder analysis, means step 2, in the next session. Let us take a 10 minutes break. This is 8 p.m. Bangladesh Standard Time. We will come back at 8:10 Bangladesh Standard Time. Thank you. We'll see you after 10 minutes. Thank you very much for joining today's session.